Todd Mullins took to the stand hoping to convince a jury that he did not kill his wife of nearly 15 years with a corn rake. Aimee Mullins was discovered in a shed on the family farm with a corn rake lodged in her back. Todd told police he thought it was an accident, but the prosecution claims he planned her murder after discovering she was having an affair. Aimee's death was ruled a homicide, and investigators say she was impaled with the rake at least twice. Another key part of the prosecution's case, the internet search history on Todd's iPad. It included killing unfaithful women. Also, this was found on there: what happens to cheaters throughout history. And this as well: once you hunt man, you will always feel the thirst. On the stand, Todd claims he didn't make those searches, but claims his kids may have done some of them. Listen here.
Starving to death, drowning, floating, those kinds of things. Do you remember, did you do any of those searches?
The drowning ones were with the kids and swimming. We were swimming in the pond.
Other searches about chest wounds, gaping chest wounds, surviving in cold, start a fire, that kind of thing. What were those about?
That was actually, Taylor was going through a hunter education program, and it was an online thing, and she was studying for it, and they had these questions on the computer, and I think, it was Aimee trying to help her out.
Joining me via Skype is host for the Law and Crime Network, criminal defense attorney Bob Bianchi, and Casey Jordan, HLN contributor, criminologist, and behavior analyst. I want to start with you, Casey. When you see him on the stand and the way he has an answer for everything, saying my kids may have done this in terms of the search history and just his affect, what's your take on this, the believability?
Well, it depends on who we're trying to convince. I'm not convinced. This reminds me a lot of the Casey Anthony case and the computer searches that were done on that computer, and we know the outcome of that particular jury trial. The real question is this jury convinced? Do they find it believable that a young girl would do net searches for gaping chest wound and starving to death as part of a hunter education program? I don't buy it, and I don't think most reasonable people would. But the real question is going to be whether this jury is feeling sympathetic to this particular farmer defendant. If they relate to him, you never know how the verdict could be.
Exactly. Good point about the jury. And Bob, in terms of him testifying, if you were his attorney, would you have suggested that? And ultimately, who does it come down to? Who decides? The client,
well,
right?
ultimately the client decides. But as a former homicide prosecutor who's tried innumerable murder cases before I was a defense lawyer, I got to tell you, Susan, I'm liking the way the prosecution's case is coming out here. Because not only are those internet searches bad, he also did an internet search of her previous lover, for which he was very upset about. He finds out about the new lover, and in that state, they're allowed to introduce evidence called victim impact information, where the victim was saying that if he finds out, essentially on innumerable occasions, I'm going to be dead. Now, in my state, you're not allowed to bring that out because you can't cross-examine the declarant of that statement. But that came out during the course of this case. Not to mention the fact that the directionality of these time wounds, if you will, from this corn rake are in opposite directions. The 13-year-old son finds the mother in the barn. And lastly, why I really love this case if I were prosecuting it, who else is around to have committed the murder? Who else had the motive? Who else was at that farm? No one. So that all spells disaster in my mind. I don't think him taking the stand wins the day because, as your previous guest indicated, jurors are going to be looking at him, and unless he can really wow them, I used to love as a prosecutor getting a defendant on the stand when I had evidence like that.
Well, what people are talking about is his lack of emotion. Even investigators discuss this as well. Here he is after discovering his wife and just how he comes off and never really seems emotional, being the husband. Let's listen.
What did you see when you stepped in through that door?
Well, when I stepped in, I initially looked at Tristan, and I looked over, and I seen Aimee hunched up, face down, laying next to the door, leaning against the door.
Did she have this corn fork stuck in her?
Yeah. Mullis just dove down by her. I put my head down. I was like, Aimee, Aimee. I was yelling at her, trying to get her attention. I didn't know what to think. I was just looking at her, and I picked her head up a little bit, and it was just nothing. It was no response.
So, Casey, ultimately, as you said, it does come down to what the jury believes. But when you see that, what do you see? Someone who's kind of the monotone, not even going back there really mentally.
Well, okay, I don't know if this is just a laconic farmer and that's his natural affect, but I have to tell you, the average jury wants to see some real emotion. The typical husband's going to be like hysterical. He's going to be choking up. He's going to be talking about the moment he found his wife dead on the shed floor. But again, she has got a corn fork sticking out of her back, and the forensic pathologist said she was hit at least 2, maybe 3 times with it. And his answer was she must have fallen on it. So I don't think that anything he says, Bob is absolutely correct. With the history of that affair with the fellow farmer next door, I don't think this jury is going to give him a pass, but you never know.
Yeah, and Bob, speaking of the affair, he doesn't even admit that he knew about the affair. Would you have advised that? He's saying he didn't know, almost eliminating the motive.
Well, you can't tell a client what to say other than to tell the truth. But there are 3 tells that he gave in his statement and throughout this case. One is he won't even admit to it when we knew he was doing internet searches, and there are other evidence that shows that he did know about it. The second one is when he was confronted by the police in the statement where they said, "We believe she was murdered and that you are responsible." His answer isn't, "Well, my God, what are you talking about? I didn't do that." His answer is, "What evidence do you have?" And then, lastly, when he is when talking about this relationship, he is never saying in any way, shape, or form that it existed, that I was upset about it, but I didn't do this. Rather, he is trying to find ways to get around evidence that he certainly is not going to be able to, in my mind, during the course of this case.
Yeah, and we'll see what the jury believes. I believe it is to the jury right now. We'll see how much was believable with him on the stand. And, Bob, good point. You never want to tell your client a lie. Just tell the truth and get up there. We'll see what the jury believes. Casey, Bob, thank you.
You got it. Thank you, Susan.